said the gentleman cowboy, sitting on the front porch of the Black Dog Saloon. "I'm powerful worried about your daughter." He was looking across the street at a young woman dressed in denim jeans and a brown buckskin vest. Her boots looked like she had worn them for years. Her hat was an old brown Stetson, under which a loose blonde ponytail fell between her shoulder blades. She was saddling a massive strawberry roan mare, like any man could be found doing. The horse had just been shod in the adjoining livery stable, and was now ready to travel. Zeke looked up from the chessboard between them, and fixed a steady gaze on his old friend. "It's your move," grunted Zeke, "and you're losing. You ought to be more concerned about the board and less concerned with her backside." The woman was bending over now to tighten the underbelly cinch of the saddle. Her bottom filled out her jeans quite nicely, and though her manner of dress would be quite common for women in 100 years, today it was making Jake Daggert most uncomfortable. "Well," sighed Jake, "she's quite the distraction, Zeke. I don't ever recall a pair of men's work pants having such a profound effect on me before." Zeke laughed. "You ought to get out more," he said. He watched Jake push one of his white pawns up to the Queen Bishop foursquare, and then leave it there. Jake sat back again and resumed his gaze towards the woman across the street. "Well now," said Jake, "I's just thinking, Zeke. She spends a awful lot of time out there by herself on the open prairie, doing God knows what. Suppose she'd meet up with one of them outlaws." Zeke smiled at this. The irony of that was not lost on him. "Oh, I mean like that Sundown feller," said Jake seriously. "He's been seen out this way recently. People like Sundown. He ain't like me and you was, Zeke. We was gentlemen outlaws. Lord only knows what drives that feller. Ain't you worried none about her?" "Sundown," mused Zeke, as he plotted his next move. "Do we know him?" "Humph," grunted Jake. "Course not. He robs trains. He ain't even in our league." Zeke picked up his black knight and took one of Jake's white bishops. Jake's mind was clearly not on the game today. Both men were drinking wild turkey and smoking imported Cuban cigars. They routinely played chess out here, on the front porch of the Black Dog, nearly every afternoon. Neither man had touched a hand of poker in the last 15 years. Poker led to other vices, like robbing banks. Neither man had robbed a bank in more than 15 years, either. To look at these two men sitting here now, quietly absorbed in their game of chess, it was impossible to tell that, at one time, these two men had been part of the Silent Shadows Gang, the most successful bank-robbing outfit in the history of the American West. That had been 15 years ago. Now their criminal history was a thing of the past. Only Zeke Jacobs and Jake Daggert were still around to talk about it. Both of them had sworn never to even mention the Silent Shadows ever again. So long as they could keep their mouths shut, the gang would remain forever unknown and uncaptured. All of the other members were long dead and buried. They were now gentlemen cattle barons, and had a handsome income from laundering their ill-gotten gains in the livestock market. Being men of leisure, they had decided to ensure each other's silence by taking up chess, and spending untold hours staring at the 64 squares in contemplative silence, rather like Trappist monks on an inner journey for enlightenment. It was safe and kept them off the streets. The woman was now walking towards them, leading the great horse. She smiled up at them sweetly. "Paul," she said, nodding to Zeke. "Mr. Daggett. Afternoon." Jake sat up and assumed a proper position in the presence of a lady. "Ma'am," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm fixin' to head out to the canyon for a few days, Pa," said Sunshine Jacobs. "I'll probably be gone a couple of weeks. Want to get down to River's End and see Uncle Jack and Grandma Mary. It's been a while." "Be careful," said Zeke, not looking up from his game. Jake sat back and shook his head, tisking to himself. "Is there a problem, Mr. Daggett?" asked Sunshine, upon seeing his consternation. "Pretty thing like you," he said, still shaking his head, "out traipsing around the wilderness all by yourself. You ought to be in a dress, finding some rich man to take care of you." Sunshine laughed. "I got a rich man to take care of me, Mr. Daggett. My daddy." She winked up at Zeke, who couldn't help but grin. He loved his little girl, no matter how big she got. "But having to saddle your own horse, Sunshine, you need a man for that," Jake insisted. She knew exactly which man he had in mind for her as well. Jake had been after her since she had been 14 years old, and he had spied her sunbathing down by the river in the Altogether. He had had a thing for her ever since. "I got 2 hands, Mr. Daggett," said Sunshine. "I'll take care of it myself." "But," he pushed, "what about intimacy, Sunshine? Physical comfort, the natural union of God's creatures?" Sunshine smiled her most impish smile up at him. She mounted her horse and turned its head away. As she was turning to go, she answered him. "Oh, you mean sex, Mr. Daggett? Like I said, I got 2 hands. I'll take care of it myself." She rode off without another word to either of them. Jake sat back, fuming to himself, while Zeke chuckled noiselessly in his throat. "Impudent little cuss," said Jake. "I swear, you ought to take a strap to her, Zeke." Zeke smiled up at his friend. "Tried that," he said, "when she was 14. "What happened?" Jake wanted to know. "When I was through, she stood up, turned around, and smiled at me." "What?" Jake asked. "No tears, no nothing," said Zeke. Zeke looked out and watched his daughter disappear in the distance. From the edge of town. "I'd sooner cut a Comanche," he said softly. "At least they bleed."